The cheap burger, the quick fries, the late-night run, the school night shortcut, the road trip stop, the break from cooking that felt easy and harmless for millions of people is starting to crack. This video breaks down why that is happening right now, what the data says, where the money is going, and how you can spot the difference between a fast food habit that still works and one that now quietly drains your budget. Starting with the simplest reason of all: price. Fast food culture in America was built on the idea that the trade was obvious. You paid a little more than you would at home, but you got speed, certainty, and no cleanup. That only works when the premium feels small. Once the premium feels large, the whole mental trick stops working. In 2025, food away from home prices rose 4.1%, faster than food at home prices. In January of 2026, food away from home prices were still up 4.0% from a year earlier, and limited service meals and snacks were up 3.2%. That means the category many people think of as the cheaper restaurant option kept getting more expensive, even after the biggest inflation shock had already become part of normal life. That sounds abstract until you think about how fast food actually works in real life. The culture was never powered only by hunger. It was powered by low-friction decisions. The old logic was, I do not want to cook, I do not want to think, and this will not hurt too much. That sentence used to be the engine of the whole system. Now the sentence has changed. Now it is more like, how much is this combo? Is there a deal in the app? Is the drink worth it? Is delivery going to double the total? Should I just buy groceries instead? And why does this not feel cheap anymore? The moment a quick meal starts demanding analysis, it stops feeling like fast food in the old American sense. It becomes another spending decision that competes with everything else. That is why the size of the industry can rise at the same time the culture weakens. More money flowing through the system does not always mean people feel better about it. Sometimes it means the opposite. Census data showed food service and drinking places up year over year at the end of 2025, but those sales figures are not adjusted for price changes. The National Restaurant Association also said real gains for the broader industry in 2026 are expected to be modest. In plain English, some of what looks like growth is really just higher checks moving through the register. The cash number gets bigger. The feeling of value does not. That matters because fast food culture has always depended more on repeat comfort than on single-purchase excitement. Fine dining can survive on occasion spending. Fast food cannot. It needs routine. It needs the lunch break that comes without debate. It needs the default family stop on a chaotic evening. It needs the easy promise that a decent meal can be bought fast, cheaply, and without a second thought. Once that promise weakens, the habit becomes fragile. You may still go sometimes, but the reflex is gone. Then there is the way people actually consume the food now. Nearly 75% of all restaurant traffic now happens off-premises, according to National Restaurant Association research. About 3 out of 4 diners are ordering restaurant meals to eat somewhere else. Among younger consumers, especially Gen Z and millennials, nearly 6 in 10 order takeout or drive-through meals weekly. And when those customers think about value, price is only part of it. The association says speedy service, intuitive tech, loyalty programs, and discounts are all now table stakes for repeat business, with value deals resonating with 8 in 10 delivery, takeout, and drive-through customers. That sounds like convenience winning. In one sense, it is. But in another sense, it is part of the cultural collapse. Fast food used to be more than a transaction. It was one of the few truly shared American habits. It lived in the car, yes, but also in the dining room, on the after-game stop, on the family errand route, during road trips, after school, during a rushed lunch break with coworkers, on the way home from church, on the way to a movie, after a late shift. It was woven into ordinary life because it occupied actual physical moments. Now so much of it is stripped of place. It is app, bag, couch, car cup holder, delivery handoff. The food is still there. The culture around it is thinner. When 3 out of 4 restaurant occasions happen off-premises, you get more convenience, but you also lose some of the glue that built long-term affection. It becomes easier to swap one chain for another because the experience is no longer tied to a space you inhabit. The dining room matters less. The neighborhood location matters less. The order becomes more portable, more private, and more replaceable. You are not going there in the old sense. You are just solving a problem. This matters for loyalty in a way people often miss. If a meal is eaten somewhere else, ordered through a phone, and judged mostly by price, speed, and whether anything went wrong, then the margin for disappointment gets smaller. And then delivery made the trust problem worse. Delivery did not just add convenience. It changed what people expect, what restaurants pay, and what customers notice when the final total appears. Even people who rarely use delivery apps have learned a new reflex from them. Always check the full price, because the first price may not be the real price. That is poison to a culture built on quick certainty. Grubhub became a symbol of that problem when the Federal Trade Commission and the Illinois Attorney General said the company would pay $25 million to settle charges that included deceiving diners about delivery costs and listing restaurants without permission. The FTC said the company hid the true cost of delivery and used what one former executive called a pricing shell game, with final prices often more than double what was originally advertised. Whatever people think about one company, that case captured a broader feeling many customers already had. The path from menu item to final bill no longer feels clean or trustworthy. That feeling hit restaurants too. In New York City, lawmakers capped what delivery companies could charge restaurants for delivery and related services after restaurants complained about fees as high as 30%. Reuters reported that the city's law limited delivery charges to 15% and advertising and related services to 5%, and that the companies later settled lawsuits over those rules. You do not need to love or hate the platforms to see what the fight reveals. If restaurants feel squeezed, workers feel squeezed, and customers feel tricked by the total, then delivery is not simply extending fast food culture. It is changing the math of it in ways that make everyone more suspicious. That suspicion changes behavior. People start using delivery less often, or they use it only when the situation is serious enough to justify the premium, or they switch to pickup, or they abandon the order before checkout. The point is not that delivery disappears. The point is that it teaches consumers to treat a simple meal like an airline fare. Check the base, check the fees, check the add-ons, check the membership perk, check the service charge. That is not how the old culture worked. The old culture was not about line-by-line cost analysis. It was about not having to care. The next big shift is the rise of app-first fast food. This one is easy to overlook because it often feels helpful. Sometimes the app does save you money. Sometimes the points really do stack up. Sometimes the free item is real. But culturally, the app changes the relationship. The old fast food world was built on public pricing. The sign was the sign. The menu board was the menu board. The deal was visible to everybody. The new world is partly private. It lives in member offers, countdown coupons, birthday perks, challenge rewards, personalized bundles, and limited-time deals that may only make sense if you already play the game. That means the culture moves from one of open convenience to one of managed engagement. Restaurants are not just selling food. They are trying to pull you into a loop. Download, sign in, turn on notifications, earn points, redeem late, check tomorrow, try this new add-on, come back for a streak bonus. It is smart business, but it changes the feeling of the category. A quick meal becomes a small subscription-like behavior pattern. You can still get value, but now you often have to perform for it. The National Restaurant Association's off-premises research shows how far this has gone. Good service and speed still matter, of course, but intuitive ordering tech and loyalty programs are now described as table stakes. In other words, the basic standard for winning repeat business is no longer just make the food and do it fast. It is build a digital system that keeps the guest attached. That is a different business from the old counter-service culture many people still think they are participating in. There is also a social effect. App culture quietly divides customers into tiers. The person who knows the code, checks the app, and times the order gets one price. The walk-in customer who just wants lunch gets another experience. That does not always mean unfairness in a legal sense, but it does mean the category feels less straightforward. Once customers suspect that the real value is hidden behind a phone screen, the counter and menu board lose authority. Trust thins out. You can see that change clearly in the biggest burger system in the country. McDonald's had a strong finish to 2025 on paper. The company said fourth quarter comparable sales rose 5.7% globally and 6.8% in the United States, with full-year United States comparable sales up 2.1%. Management also said value leadership was working and that affordability scores had improved. At the same time, the company reported nearly 210 million 90-day active loyalty users across 70 loyalty markets and nearly $37 billion in system-wide sales to loyalty members for the year. That is an extraordinary digital engine. But it also says something deeper about the culture. When a chain that size has to lean so hard on value architecture, loyalty membership, and affordability perception to drive momentum, it tells you the old assumption of automatic cheapness is gone. The company is not just serving food, it is actively rebuilding the case that it is still worth choosing. McDonald's also became a very clear example of how modern success and cultural stress can happen at the same time. Restaurant Dive reported that the company gained share with low-income consumers in December and saw meaningful increases in value and affordability scores after pushing its value platforms. That sounds like strength, and in one sense it is, but in another sense it is evidence that the fight is now harder. A chain that once stood almost automatically for cheap consistency now has to defend that identity with formal campaigns, sharper pricing discipline, and massive app-powered retention. That is not normal background maintenance. That is a sign that the bargain Americans once took for granted has to be argued for again and again. Then come the cost pressures inside the restaurants themselves. People often talk as if fast food chains simply chose to get greedy, and that is the whole story. Profit-seeking is obviously part of any large business. But the deeper reality is that the low-price model got harder to maintain because labor, ingredients, and operating complexity rose at the same time customers became less willing to absorb the bill. In California, fast food workers covered by the state's law have had to be paid at least $20 an hour since April 1, 2024. Nationally, average hourly earnings in food services and drinking places reached about $21.83 in December of 2025. Operators are also saying they plan to invest more in technology, digital ordering, automation, and data analytics to improve efficiency. That combination changes the whole machine. When labor is more expensive, the business needs more output per worker, fewer mistakes, better throughput, and tighter menus. That can mean more screens, more automation, more upselling prompts, fewer humans doing more tasks, and less tolerance for dining rooms that do not produce enough return. Again, none of this means the sector vanishes. It means the old, low-cost, high-volume, casual-feeling model becomes harder to preserve. The business starts acting less like a neighborhood shortcut and more like a precision retail system. This is where a lot of consumer frustration comes from. People do not always see the full cost structure. They just feel the result. A place that seems more expensive. A staff that seems more rushed. A kiosk replacing the old order flow. A stronger push toward the app. A menu that feels trimmed or optimized. A dining room that feels less central to the experience. From the company side, that may be rational adaptation. From the customer side, it can feel like the soul is getting sanded off. And not every chain absorbs the pressure the same way. Some can hold traffic better, some can raise prices, some can lean into drinks, breakfast, or digital strength, some cannot. Starbucks is a good example of how this squeeze works even when traffic improves. In the first quarter of fiscal 2026, the company said comparable store sales rose 4% globally and 4% in the United States, driven by a 3% increase in transactions and a 1% increase in average ticket. It was the first time in 8 quarters that United States comparable transaction growth turned positive. That sounds like a comeback, and in many ways it was. But the same report also said North America operating margin fell from 16.7% to 11.9%, pressured by labor investments, tariffs, and elevated coffee pricing. So even a business with better traffic could not simply drift back to old economics. It had to spend and absorb cost pressure to win those customers back. That is one more sign that quick service culture is no longer running on autopilot. Starbucks also moved to refresh its loyalty system with more structured tiers and richer benefits. That tells you what kind of era this is. The goal is not just to sell a drink. The goal is to increase member engagement, repeat frequency, and emotional lock-in in a market where people are more selective. When chains need deeper loyalty engineering to hold attention, it usually means the basic habit is not as stable as it once was. A lot of this is hidden in plain sight. Customers see a free item here, a points challenge there, and maybe think companies are simply being generous. Chipotle shows another side of the same story. In the fourth quarter of 2025, the company reported revenue of about $3 billion, up 4.9% from a year earlier. But comparable restaurant sales fell 2.5% because transactions dropped 3.2%, partly offset by a small increase in average check. For the full year, comparable sales fell 1.7% because transactions were down 2.9%. Labor costs also ticked up, and digital sales remained a very large share of the business. That is a near-perfect example of why headline revenue can fool people. A chain can grow total dollars through new openings and still be serving fewer customers at existing stores. The register can look healthy while the habit underneath softens. Chipotle also helps explain why Americans increasingly talk about quick-service food in two separate ways. On one side is price pain, on the other side is perceived quality. People will sometimes pay more if they feel the food is fresher, more customizable, or less like a guilty compromise. But that creates a tough middle ground for traditional fast food. If it is no longer reliably cheap, then it has to compete harder on quality, identity, or convenience. That is not the old system. The old system won by being the easiest, yes. The new system often has to prove it deserves to be chosen at all. That is why saying fast food is expensive now is true but still incomplete. The deeper truth is that the category is being forced to answer a new question. If you are not clearly cheap, what are you? For some chains, the answer is speed. For others, it is protein, coffee, customization, breakfast, or digital ease. But the fact that the question exists at all tells you the old culture is wobbling. Then, there is the physical map of the industry. Fast food in America grew not just by being popular, but by being everywhere. The system expanded until the locations themselves became part of the background of daily life. A highway exit, a suburban corner, a strip center, a gas station pad, a food court, a school route, a commuter corridor. That everywhere-ness created power. It made the culture feel permanent. But when an industry gets too built out, the same network that once created strength can start creating weakness. Too many similar boxes, too much internal competition, too many average locations that made sense when traffic was easier and money was looser. That is one reason closures matter symbolically even when the broader industry is still large. A closure is not just a lost store. It is a lost signal of cultural dominance. It tells people a routine is no longer guaranteed. It breaks the illusion that the category can simply plant another unit anywhere and expect the old traffic to appear. Once enough closures happen in enough familiar places, people stop feeling that the fast food landscape is unstoppable. It starts to look mortal. Subway is probably the clearest warning sign here. The chain lost a net 631 United States restaurants in 2024, ending the year with 19,502 domestic locations, below 20,000 for the first time in about 2 decades. On top of that, a franchisee operating 43 stores in several states filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, saying short-term merchant cash advance funding and lender interference with sales revenue pushed the business into deep trouble. That does not mean every sandwich shop is doomed. It means the old expansion logic can turn against itself. Once a giant system becomes overextended, uneven stores become harder to save, and the network that once felt unbeatable starts shrinking in public view. The Subway example is important because it shows that more units is not the same thing as stronger culture. For years, the chain's sheer footprint made it feel unavoidable. But ubiquity without durable traffic, strong franchise economics, and clear consumer value can become a burden. When the map corrects, the culture around it corrects too. Familiarity alone stops being enough. Health is another slow but powerful force behind the cultural shift. And this part has to be said carefully because it is easy to overstate. Americans still eat plenty of fast food. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported that during the period from August of 2021 through August of 2023, About 1/3 of adults aged 20 and older consumed fast food on a given day. On average, adults got 11.7% of their daily calories from fast food, and younger adults, ages 20 to 39, got 15.2%. So this is not a story of sudden abstinence. Fast food remains deeply woven into ordinary eating in the United States. But those same numbers also show why the category is vulnerable. If 1/3 of adults are still eating it on a given day, then even small behavior changes can have large ripple effects. You do not need a dramatic cultural revolution. You just need some people to trim frequency, skip sides, choose smaller portions, or move a few meals back home. That is enough to weaken traffic in a business built on relentless repetition. And now, there is a new force sitting on top of that old health pressure: appetite-changing medication. A Cornell-linked research paper using transaction data from a representative United States household panel found that within 6 months of adopting these medications, households reduced grocery spending by 5.3%, and spending at fast food chains, coffee shops, and other limited service restaurants fell by about 8.0%. The paper also found the largest spending declines in calorie-dense processed categories. That does not mean all users stop eating out. It does mean a growing group of consumers may be less interested in large indulgent orders, snacks, sugary drinks, and extra add-ons. This matters culturally because fast food has long depended on appetite amplification: bigger combo, limited time flavor, extra side, dessert add-on, larger drink, late-night impulse. The category has always been very good at nudging people slightly beyond strict need. If more consumers are moving towards smaller portions, higher protein, lower sugar, or simply less frequent eating because their appetite signals changed, the old playbook gets weaker. Even before these medications, a lot of younger consumers were already more ingredient aware and more label aware than earlier generations. The medication trend adds another layer of pressure to that shift. You can already see how chains are responding: more protein messaging, smaller format options, cleaner sounding ingredient language, more explicit customization, more effort to appear compatible with goals rather than opposed to them. That is not a random marketing fad. It is a response to a world in which the old "treat yourself and do not think too hard" message does not land the same way on as many people as it once did. There is an emotional side to this too. For a long time, fast food could lean on a kind of harmless rebellion. It was the little shortcut, the small escape, the guilty pleasure that did not feel serious. As health awareness rose, that emotional framing got shakier. For some people, especially those trying to manage weight, blood sugar, energy, or mood, fast food now carries more psychological friction. Again, not for everyone, but enough to matter. A culture built on easy yes does not love psychological friction. There is also a generational issue many older narratives miss. The heaviest fast food calorie share in the CDC data is among adults 20 to 39. That means the people in prime working, parenting, commuting, and time-starved years are still the group most tied to the category. If that group becomes more price-sensitive, more health-conscious, more app-dependent, and more likely to eat off-premises, then the whole culture changes from the inside. The audience is still there, but the terms are different. At this point, a fair question is obvious. If prices are up, traffic is under pressure, delivery created trust issues, apps turned meals into gamified transactions, labor costs are higher, and health behavior is shifting, why has the industry not fallen apart completely? The answer is that collapse in culture does not mean every business fails. It means the winners change, the old assumptions die, and the category becomes more polarized. Some chains still know how to win this environment. Domino's is a strong example. Reuters reported that the company's United States same-store sales rose 3.7% in the fourth quarter of 2025, helped by value-driven promotions and new menu items. In other words, consumers still respond when the deal is obvious, the product is predictable, and the ordering path is simple. That does not prove the old fast food culture is healthy. It proves something narrower and more important. People still want convenient restaurant food, but they are far less forgiving now. If the value is clear, they come. If the value feels fuzzy, they hesitate. That is why the title of this video is about fast food culture, not just fast food companies. The culture that is collapsing is the old mass assumption that almost any major chain could count on cheapness, habit, and default loyalty. That world is fading. What replaces it is more selective and more brittle. Customers are splitting into groups. One group chases hard value. Another pays more for perceived quality. Another lives in the app ecosystem. Another cuts frequency and cooks more often. Another still uses the category heavily but only under certain rules, such as pickup instead of delivery or breakfast instead of dinner. A shared national habit becomes a set of narrower behaviors. That fragmentation is a cultural collapse, even if the broader restaurant economy remains large. Shared habits are powerful because they compress difference. Everybody kind of knows the move. Everybody kind of knows the price band. Everybody kind of knows what the category means. Once those shared expectations splinter, the culture loses force. Fast food becomes less like a universal American shortcut and more like a menu of separate strategies. There is a small but revealing detail in the industry research that shows this perfectly. The National Restaurant Association says value is about more than price now. It includes speed, service, ease of ordering, loyalty benefits, and convenience. Circana says value buyers are more likely to buy value items across chains, not just within one favorite brand. Put those together, and you get the new reality. Fast food is no longer one clear proposition. It is a bundle of trade-offs, and customers are constantly scoring those trade-offs in real time. That also changes what disappointment means. In the old system, a mediocre fast food meal could still feel okay because the expectations were simple. It was cheap, it was fast, it was near. Today, if the customer has paid more, hunted for the coupon, waited for the order, eaten it off premises, and maybe even paid extra through a platform, the bar is higher. The same meal can feel much worse because more effort went into justifying it. That is why online outrage over quick-service meals can look outsized. It is not only about the burger or sandwich, it is about broken expectation math. Another thing people miss is that fast food once helped solve a social timing problem in American life. It sat at the exact intersection of work hours, school pickups, suburban commuting, sports practice, and shrinking time at home. It was part fuel, part routine, part reward, part escape valve. That timing problem still exists, maybe more than ever. But the solution set has widened. Grocery stores have better prepared food. Warehouses and convenience stores have stronger grab-and-go options. Home kitchens are full of easy frozen and air fryer solutions. Meal kits and curbside pickup exist. Even if those alternatives are not always better, they change the comparison set. Fast food is no longer the only obvious answer to a chaotic evening. And because it is more expensive than it once felt, it loses some of the automatic edge it used to have. Notice what is happening there. The time problem stayed. The economic answer changed. That is often what collapse looks like in consumer culture. The need remains. The old solution stops feeling magical. It becomes just one option in a crowded field. This is also why so many chains now talk less like restaurants and more like tech-enabled convenience platforms. They talk about throughput, digital engagement, order channels, loyalty members, ticket mix, personalized value, automation, and operational excellence. None of that language is fake. It reflects the reality of the business. But it also tells you how far the culture has moved from the old picture in people's heads. The old picture was simple food, simple pricing, simple routine. The new one is optimized retail. There is a kind of irony here. Fast food culture in America was once criticized for being too standardized, too automated, too impersonal, too dominant. And yet some of the same people now feel nostalgic for the version that existed only a few years ago. Why? Because the old flaws came with an old comfort. The food was not fancy, but the deal made sense. The dining room was not beautiful, but it was there. The meal was not healthy, but it was predictable. Once price, trust, and spontaneity weaken, people start missing parts of the old system they never thought they would miss. That does not mean the past was perfect. It means value is emotional as much as financial. A meal can be basic and still feel worth it. A meal can even be objectively unhealthy and still feel culturally stable if the customer believes the trade is fair. What is collapsing now is often that sense of fairness. This is why the most important shift may be invisible. Fast food used to ask almost nothing from the customer except money. Now it asks attention. Check the app. Check the deal. Check the fee. Check the points. Check the line. Check the delivery total. Check whether the quality is worth this location. Check whether the kids will even like it enough to justify the stop. That is a very different mental load. And categories that once won by reducing mental load do not thrive when they start adding it. There is another subtle cultural loss too. In the old model, speed covered many flaws. If the food was not great, at least it was fast. If the dining room was plain, at least the stop was easy. If the nutrition profile was bad, at least the cost and convenience were obvious. But when speed gets paired with higher prices and more digital steps, speed alone stops being enough. It becomes merely the minimum. Customers start wanting speed plus value plus reliability plus decent quality. That is a much harder equation. No surprise, then, that chains with the clearest answer are holding up best. The answer can be best deal. It can be better coffee. It can be more protein. It can be faster pizza. It can be easier rewards. But there has to be an answer. "We are fast food, so you will come" is not enough anymore. That is why I do not think the right conclusion is that Americans will stop eating quick-service food. The right conclusion is that the old culture of thoughtless, broad-based, low-friction fast food loyalty is fading. The industry will keep adapting. Some chains will do well, some formats will grow, some store counts will keep rising. But the blanket cultural dominance is not what it was. Look again at the mix of signals. Food away from home spending is huge, but prices away from home keep rising faster than grocery prices. Industry sales are still growing, but real growth is modest. Operators still add jobs, but many report weak traffic. Off-premises ordering is dominant, but that strips away some of the physical social ritual that helped make the category feel sticky. Value deals drive traffic, but that also trains customers to hop between chains. Digital loyalty grows, but that means the public menu is no longer the whole game. Labor costs rise, which pushes automation and tighter operations. Health awareness grows, while appetite-changing drugs may reduce spending at limited-service restaurants. Giant networks still exist, but some are shrinking and weaker operators are getting exposed. None of those facts alone kills the culture. Together, they explain why the old version is cracking. That is why fast food culture in America is not really collapsing because people suddenly became too disciplined, or because every chain forgot how to cook. It is collapsing because the old four-part promise is breaking. Cheap is weaker. Fast is no longer enough. Easy now often comes with digital homework. Familiar no longer guarantees loyalty. When those pillars wobble at the same time, the culture around them loses force. And once culture loses force, the symbols change. The drive-thru is still there, but it does not feel as carefree. The combo is still there, but it gets judged harder. The late-night run is still there, but it may happen less often. The family stop is still there, but it is negotiated instead of assumed. The app still promises savings, but it also reminds you that the base experience no longer feels generous enough on its own. The meal still arrives, but the old emotional ease does not always arrive with it. If this breakdown helped you see the pattern more clearly, hit like, share it with someone who keeps saying fast food just feels off now, and comment with this specific question. What was the last fast food order that made you think that was not worth the price? And what exactly went wrong?